Welcome back. Every day but two in this new year, the U.S. has seen at least 220,000 confirmed new cases of COVID-19. And the death toll this week stands at over 23,000. As you can see, just divide that number by 7, and that's over 3,000 a day. Those grim numbers come as the nation's vaccine distribution program is becoming increasingly chaotic, and a new, more contagious strain of the virus threatens to fuel yet another surge of cases. So joining me now with the latest on what we can expect is Dr. Anthony Fauci, who will be President-elect Joe Biden's chief medical advisor on COVID-19 in addition to his usual duties. Dr. Fauci, welcome back to Meet the Press. So let me start with this plain up the vaccine question, which is there was this announcement. President-elect Biden calls for releasing all of the stockpile. The Trump administration agrees, and all of a sudden there's no stockpile. Was this a miscommunication? Was this a bigger error? What is the explanation here?
You know, I'm not exactly sure, Chuck, but I tried and I think successfully sorted that out. I had a conversation with General Perna last night and again this morning. And I think there was just a misunderstanding. In the beginning, when it wasn't quite clear about what the cadence, as he calls it, of the rolling out of doses would be, there was a lot of caution. So they wanted to make sure that everyone who got a first dose got a second dose on time. So when doses were released, an equal amount was kept back to make sure that if there was any glitches in the supply flow, that the people who got their first doses would clearly get their second doses. After a couple of cycles, when it became clear that the cadence of the flow of doses was really going to be consistent and reliable, the decision was made, instead of just giving enough for the first dose and holding back for the second dose, that as soon as they got the doses available, they would give it, because now they would have confidence that the next amount they would get, they'd have enough at least to give everybody the second dose, and then some to give the first dose. So that's all it was a sort of, as you went a few weeks into it, the confidence that you would have doses to give the second dose made people say, you know, we don't have to hold back any doses because the flow is consistent. Literally, that's just what we had a discussion of, as well as last night. So I think that's what the confusion was about. So hopefully that's clarified now.
All right, so you oversee vaccine creation, so I'm curious on the manufacturing aspect of things. The President-elect Biden has promised to invoke the DPA, the Defense Production Act, on the vaccine manufacturing process. Will that help in the short term, or is that something that we won't see the benefits of that until the summer?
Well, you know, I can tell you one thing that's clear is that the issue of getting 100 million doses in the first 100 days is absolutely a doable thing. What the president-elect is going to do is, where need be, to invoke the DPA to get the kinds of things we need, whatever they may be they tests, be they vaccines, or what have you. In other words, to just not be hesitant to use whatever mechanisms we can to get everything on track and in the flow that he predicts. But the feasibility of his goal is absolutely clear. There's no doubt about that can be done.
The guidelines that various state and local authorities are using to distribute the vaccine, clearly they were a bit too strict if we're finding ourselves throwing away vaccine. Do you feel as if that has changed enough so that we're not going to be throwing away vaccine?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, one of the things that's clear is that the CDC came out on the basis of the recommendations from the ACIP about different groups, 1A, 1B, 1C, as recommendations and guidelines, not real restrictions. And what happened is that, maybe understandably, the states and the local authorities were really very strictly adhering to that, where right now what the CDC is saying, those are guidelines. You got to loosen them up, be less rigid about it. And the one thing you don't want is that if you have vaccine left over, then just move on to the next group. It's kind of like if you want to use the metaphor of when, you're boarding a plane, everybody gets on the group one, and if not everybody gets on, you open up group two, but group one can still go on. You just want a steady flow. You don't want to hold back. You want to not essentially overshoot nor undershoot, but just let the flow keep going. I think, Chuck, that's going to work well looking forward.
How close are we on Johnson & Johnson and the AstraZeneca vaccines?
Soon, Chuck. I mean, we're going to be meeting with the authorities on that. They have a lot of events meaning infections within the context of the trial. So their data, I think, very soon, I would imagine within a period of a week or so, or at the most a couple of weeks, they're going to be getting their data together and showing it to the FDA. Well, obviously, they're going to have to get their Data and Safety Monitoring Board to look at it to see if it is appropriate to start, essentially putting the package together to get an emergency use authorization. But we're weeks away, not months away, for sure.
What's your level of concern about this new variant that clearly that a lot of folks are concerned is certainly more contagious?
Yeah. Well, we're taking it really very seriously, Chuck. You don't want people to panic, but you have to look at it from a certain standpoint. Yes, there's no doubt when you look at what the Brits, and now remember, people need to realize there's more than one mutant strain. There's one from the UK that's essentially dominated. That's the one that is seen in the United States. There's another more ominous one that's in South Africa and Brazil. We're looking at all of them very, very carefully, to determine. I mean, obviously, the Brits have made it very clear that it's more contagious. They say that it isn't more virulent, but, we got to be careful because the more cases you get, even though on a one-to-one basis, it's not more virulent, meaning it doesn't make you more sick or more likely to die. Just by numbers alone, the more cases you have, the more hospitalizations you're going to have, and the more hospitalizations you have, the more deaths you're going to have. The thing we really want to look at carefully is that does that mutation lessen the impact of the vaccine? And if it does, Chuck, then we're going to have to make some modifications. But we're all over that. We're looking at that really very carefully.
Is there a point with this variant that you think there's going to be new restrictions, whether advice that says double mask or additional lockdowns? Are we close to any of those ideas?
Well, I think one of the things we've got to do, Chuck, and maybe the silver lining, if you want to call that, is that when you have a variant that's really very, very different in the sense of it's more contagious, it tells you to do two things. One, double down on the public health measures that we've been talking about all the time. Be very compulsive. As the president-elect says, at least for the first 100 days and maybe more, everybody wear a mask. Keep the distance. Avoid the congregate settings. But also, another important thing, the easiest way to evade this negative effect of these new isolates is to just, when the vaccine becomes available, people should get vaccinated. Boy, if ever there was a clarion call for people to put aside vaccine hesitancy, if we can get, the overwhelming majority of the population vaccinated, we'd be in very good shape and could beat even the mutant.
That's one way to look at it. We're in a race against the mutant. Everybody get your arms out and get those needles ready to inject us. Dr. Fauci, as always, sir, thank you for coming on and sharing your expertise with us.
Thank you, Chuck.